Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Sports Insight with your host Anwar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. Yes, from the world of NBA, Brooklyn Nets managed to win against Phoenix Suns 128 to 119 on Monday. And another interesting news that LeBron James trading card sells for a record of 5.2 million. From the world of Premier League, Leicester City beats Crystal Palace 2-1 on Monday. And yes, F1 sprint qualifying approved for 3 Grand Prix in 2021 season. And yes, those were the headlines. And obviously, when we talk about sports, it's surely from all across the globe. So it's interesting to see that we have all interesting lineup of the NBA world, because we obviously talked about it in the headlines, but surely would want to discuss more about the in-depth analysis of what truly happened in the world of NBA. So we have with us Abbas Abed all the way from US. Abbas, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great. So, Abbas, we'll start off with the first match. Brooklyn Nets winning against the Phoenix Suns 128 to 119. So, what's your take on that one?
That was a good game to watch in a lot of different ways, and we'll just break it down and what actually happened in the game. So the Brooklyn Nets won 128 for the 119, which was kind of expected for the showing which was there put on the court. Devin Booker, as usual, played spectacularly for the Phoenix Suns, as he has been playing a whole year, and he chipped in with 36 points along with Torrey Craig with 20 points. And the veteran point guard, who's just putting up a show with the young ones for the Phoenix Suns with Chris Paul, has been phenomenal for this team and the growth of the young players on this team. So he chipped in with 14 points and 8 assists. Now, if you go towards the Brooklyn Nets side, their team has been playing well, and with all the additions and all the talk about the Brooklyn Nets, they're there for real. And we know that they can ball when they want to, and they have all the capability to show any team or any opposition they can take them on. So the Kyrie Irving chipped in with a decent as 34 points, and that's expected of Kyrie Irving, because we know he can put up big numbers whenever he wants to. And Blake Griffin scored 16 points for his superstar stature. But the news of the game was Kevin Durant is back. And
Yep.
Kevin Durant showed up and Kevin Durant showed out. Kevin Durant only played 28 minutes, probably because of the return from the injury. And
Right.
he may not be in for his full rhythm minute-wise, but in the 28 minutes he played, Kevin Durant scored 33 points.
Right.
That's a big news.
But even though he's back, we still are missing on the trio, if I'm not wrong. So one of them has to be out, because we still do not see the trio. The trio, that was the actual plot. Yeah. So that is the one interesting thing when it comes to Brooklyn Nets, because we still now James Harden's missing.
Yes. So the bad part is that James Harden is still missing, and they're expecting James Harden anytime within the next 2 weeks. But the best part is that Kevin Durant did not miss a beat. We usually see players coming back from injuries and take their time, 5 to 6 games, to get into their full rhythm. But we have seen this before as well, when Kevin Durant came back from his Achilles as well. He does not miss a beat, and he does not take any time at all to return to his normal form. And he's just there to reclaim the throne, whoever has it. He says that he's the best player in the league, and rightly so. He might be the most talented and the best offensive player we have in the NBA.
Right. We're talking about best players. I'm sure there's so much more that I'm going to discuss with you in a bit. When we talk about best players, we cannot forget Stephen Curry. To be honest, these days he's like, I think, one of the most influential players in the current moment, if I'm not wrong.
Steph Steph Curry has always been great. Steph Curry has been great for the NBA. Steph Curry has always been great for basketball globally in general. We see kids and the newer generation of basketball playing the game. They like to play the Steph Curry way. I wouldn't go into the discussion whether it's right or wrong, but Steph Curry has made a huge impact worldwide. And now, with his counterpart, Klay Thompson, who has been out for this season, Steph Curry had nowhere else to go but up. Steph Curry was put on a dot, and he has a cross on his back every game he plays because whatever opposition he plays against, they know all they have to do is stop Steph Curry. And I mean, how difficult it would be to just stop one guy on the team. But
Right.
when it's Steph Curry, it's really, really hard. He's making life ridiculous for his defenders. He made 85 three-pointers in a month, which is a NBA record. And
Exactly.
he's just crossing the borders. He's just breaking records at will. So this is a huge season for Steph Curry. And if I were to vote for the MVP of this season, that would go for Steph Curry for the things he does for the Golden State Warriors night in and night out.
Absolutely, and I think as we'll go further, and as he's going further with regards to his performance, every time he just makes a mark and he tries to break that record. So I think he's in one of his perfect forms, and as you discussed, 85 three-pointers in just a month, which is definitely an NBA record as well. So I think he surely is in the absolute right direction. All right, then the next match that I would want to talk about would be the LA Lakers against Orlando Magic, 114 to 103. So how do you see that? Because LA Lakers is currently standing at the 5th spot in the Western Conference.
So the Lakers are not in the ideal spot as far as their lineup is concerned. They were coming off a 3-game losing streak. Anthony Davis just came back, and Anthony Davis is nowhere near his usual Anthony Davis form. So he's taking his time to recover from his injury and get into game rhythm. But this was an easy matchup for the Lakers. The Orlando Magic do not have much firepower to put up against the Lakers. So they have Kuma Okeke, who scored 18 points, and then Gary Harris chipped in with 17 points for the Orlando Magic. But Anthony Davis, as I mentioned earlier, is not looking in his prime Anthony Davis form. He scored 18 points. But Dennis Schroeder has been a pick of the season for the Lakers. So not only he is a facilitator and a ball distributor for the Lakers, he chipped in with 21 points to go along with his 10 assists. So he has been a really, really good find for the Lakers. But the good news for the Lakers is that they have broken their 3-game losing skid with this game, But LeBron James is coming back really, really soon. And once LeBron James hits the court back, this is a totally different ball game for the Lakers. I don't think they must be they're really, really worried about their standing in the Western Conference because seeding doesn't really matter. They will be a problem for any team they face in the playoffs, no matter if it's their home court or if it's their away. I still believe that the Lakers really have a good shot in the Western Conference once LeBron James is back and once the entire team is healthy.
Right. And if we talk about LeBron James, obviously in the headlines I also talked about one interesting news in terms of LeBron James, and I'll just talk more about his trading card that was sold for a record of $5.2 million. So that's surely one of the big achievements in terms of LeBron James himself. Obviously, he himself is like a brand out there. And I think associating him with NBA is absolutely vital, to be very honest. So it's like a huge record of 5.2 million that the trading card is being sold for.
Yes, and LeBron James is an institution in himself. A lot of people talk about that coming right out of high school, not getting any college education at all, to be such a brilliant mind, basketball-wise, business-wise. He has high basketball IQ. We all know that. But the business mind he has, the insight he has in the politics, and whenever there are racial disturbances in the U.S., LeBron James is the voice to be that issues in the NFL with the President of the United States, or be that any issue with regards to the ex-president and Steph Curry or any NBA player whatsoever. When LeBron James talks, he takes everyone else under his umbrella. So he is really smart in terms of his business side, his political side, how he handles the media, how he handles his off days, how he takes care of his body. And of course, he is such a brilliant basketball player. We already know that. But off the court, he is also a brilliant mind, and a lot of praise for him. And whatever accolades he gets, he truly deserves. And he has in him basically the stance to take it the way he does, and that's LeBron James.
Yeah, absolutely. If you talk about him, he's definitely an entire institute. So I'll talk about the next game. We'll talk about Utah Jazz. Obviously, Timberwolves manages to beat Utah Jazz, which was, I think, one of the closest games that you would see. It's 105 to 104, and I think it was literally the last moment when this came into conclusion that it turned out to be them winning against Utah Jazz. So what's your take on that match?
It's always fun to watch close games because at the last moments you see who's the most clutch player and who has what it takes to make the game-winning shot. Because in the end, it's all about controlling your nerves. The defenders have to make sure they do not foul. And the offensive team has to make sure that they make the shot. So this was a really fun game to watch. The Minnesota Timberwolves took it 105 to 104 in the last moments. Right. Both teams are playing really good basketball. The Utah Jazz is leading the charts in the Western Conference. So this is a breakout season for the Utah Jazz. For them specifically, Mike Conley chipped in with 26 points and 7 assists. So he has been a key factor. And Rudy Gobert, who has always been in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year, he chipped in with 18 points. So the Utah Jazz have been playing really good basketball. And we're not really sure how they will show up in the playoffs because it is the first time they will be this good entering the playoffs. And I still believe that opponents would fear to face the teams such as Utah Jazz in the first round because they are that good. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, they haven't been playing a lot of good basketball as of late, but this season they have played really good basketball. So in this particular game, D'Angelo Russell put up a shooting show with 27 points to go along with Karl Towns. And both of these players, Karl Anthony Towns scoring 21 points, are good all-round players, and Karl Anthony Towns might be one of the most versatile and skilled big men that we have in the NBA to go with Joel Embiid and Jokic. I mean, we cannot put him at the same level as those two, but still he has all the full repertoire of moves defensively and offensively to play a complete game of basketball. So both of these teams are really good. And right now we are in a really interesting phase of the season where the playoff matchups are coming together as we speak. So it is an interesting time as the end of the regular season is near and the playoff matchups are getting put up. This is the time to watch which team will face the other team in the playoffs and then do their homework accordingly as to what pieces they have to face the other team.
Right. And if we look at the standings on the Eastern Conference, we surely see Brooklyn Nets on the top and the 76ers, then the Bucks and the Knicks. But when we talk about the Western Conference, obviously Utah Jazz being on the top, the Suns on the second, Clippers on the third, and the Nuggets on the fourth. But I'm just surprised to see the match that we just talked about because obviously Timberwolves, who actually managed to beat Utah Jazz, were and still are around on the 14th level. So what's your take on, when you see it on the table and someone at that point come up winning against, someone on the top? So how much impact would it create for Utah Jazz for the future?
I think this was one of the games, one of the off games for Utah Jazz. But as I mentioned earlier, Minnesota has been playing good basketball. We can see that they're still at the 14th seed in the West, but it's the mighty West. So there's no one team which rules the West, unlike the East.
Right.
So the 14th seed in the West, I'm not really worried about it. I don't think Utah Jazz would have a problem. That's because Utah Jazz is the only team in the league that has clinched a playoff spot as we speak. So they are the only ones that have a confirmed playoff spot right now. So they would be thinking about resting their guys, doing more and more practices and giving them less in-game practice, so that when they reach the playoffs, they are healthy. So now Utah Jazz is in a different frame of mind altogether because they have secured their spot and they have to think about what they have to do in the playoffs. But as of other matchups are concerned in the West, it is still a dogfight. As you mentioned earlier, the Phoenix Suns are at 2 and the Clippers are at 3. I think that the Nuggets and the Lakers are at 4 and 5. So they will probably see each other in the first round of playoffs. And both are really good teams. Now LeBron James is back and the way Nikola Jokic has been playing. Right. But the risky part is where the LA Clippers stand. Even though they are number 3 and they are well above the Los Angeles Lakers and the Denver Nuggets, right. Whichever team is number 3 in the Western Conference, they have to face either the Dallas Mavericks, the Luka Doncic group, or Dame Lillard and his Portland Trail Blazers, and both Luka Doncic and Dame Lillard and their teams are really, really risky to face in the first round. Right. Even though I believe that the Clippers has everything to beat those teams, but both of these teams will take enough of their stamina and enough of their juice from them in the first round that the team will have difficulty competing in the second round.
Right. Abbas, thank you so very much for being a part of the show and discussing the in-depth analysis from the world of NBA. That was Abbas, and he definitely talked more about the in-depth analysis with regards to the world of NBA. There's a lot of more sport coming up your way, so what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and once we're back from the break, we'll follow up with that. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of NBA. But not to forget that, now that we've discussed NBA, we surely would want to discuss more with regards to the world of Premier League. So yes, to discuss this with us, we have Matt Barlow all the way from London. Matt, thank you for joining in.
Hello, good to be here.
Great. So Matt, we'll be talking about Leicester City beating Crystal Palace to begin with. Obviously, last week has been critically very crazy with regard to football. So I'd surely want to hear more about how you see things evolving in the world of football.
Yes, great win for Leicester City last night, and coming after the week we've had here in England, which was days and days of talk about the Super League and the breakaway by the super rich clubs at the top. Right. Leicester really are the story of the season because they've broken into the Big Six, and their win against Crystal Palace last night, a win from behind, a late goal, another goal for Kelechi Iheanacho, who's in fantastic form. Right. It reinforces Leicester's place in the top four. They look well set for a Champions League qualifying place next season, and they've become the champions of the other teams, I think, in the Premier League. The 14, those who were not part of the breakaway faction who wanted to form a Super League. And it's a great story, and think that another win, and they're more or less in the Champions League again next season.
Right. And yes, it has been an interesting journey. If we look back into the last week's perspectives, how, the top six actually managed to come up to a point of breaking the pyramid. And obviously, then came the intervention of not only the government side, it went up to the parliament level. And I think it's still been a very tricky situation that was actually created. But I think everything is now kind of settling in with regard to the whole situation that was created.
Yeah, we had 72 hours of real crazy confusion here regarding European football, but it came and went in a storm, and by the weekend the football was back, and we saw teams get back together, and the fight for the top four is really the contest that's shaping up to be the interesting one between now and the end of the season.
True.
Chelsea won at West Ham at the weekend, which reinforced their place in fourth. But it's still going to be an interesting last few rounds because Liverpool are not too far away, and West Ham have a good run of fixtures. They'll be looking at points and thinking they can still make a charge for the top four.
Right. And not only that, if we now look into the whole situation, obviously after the entire situation of whatever was created last week, now things are settling in. And if we even talk about the Champions League, we're so looking forward for the upcoming interesting matches that, Real Madrid versus Chelsea to begin with. So how do you see that evolving in terms of, because we've seen Chelsea coming back to life after a lot of struggle, but we've also seen Real Madrid being very solid about their situation. So how do you see that semi-final lining up for tomorrow?
Yeah, you've got Chelsea and Real Madrid tonight, and tomorrow an exciting contest between Manchester City and Paris. But Chelsea are in Spain today, and Chelsea are in really good form. Right. Since Thomas Tuchel took over, they look cohesive and they're compact. They're difficult to break down. They don't concede many goals. Right. Of course, all this up against Real Madrid, the greatest team ever in European football. They've won the Champions League more times than any other team, and although they're not perhaps as strong as they have been in recent years, they still come good and and often saved their best performances for this competition. So hard to call as ever at this stage when you get down to the last four. If Chelsea can get their creative players like Werner, who scored at West Ham at the weekend, and Havertz and Mason Mount, who's been excellent this season, then they'll think they've got a chance against Real Madrid of getting to the final, and it'll be their first final since they won it in 2012.
Right. If I look back into how Real Madrid managed to get here, I still remember the last match that happened against Liverpool, and I still think one of the most organized team right now in terms of performances and from the offense to the defense. I think Real Madrid is absolutely spot on with regards to that. What's your take on how this would evolve? For instance, because I still see more victory and more connect on Real Madrid's side rather than Chelsea, even though I know Chelsea did make a super comeback and they're still growing strong. But I think the consistency of Real Madrid surely would have more chances of them taking winning against Chelsea, if you take it like that.
I think the Liverpool game was a reminder for many of us here in England that Real Madrid are still a strong team. I think it's easy to look at the league table over there or at the season they've had and think maybe they're not as strong, but the performance against Liverpool was notable for the midfield three. I think Toni Kroos and Casemiro and Luka Modric, all vastly experienced, especially in this calibre of football, and they dominated Liverpool really. And I think if you look at those three and you look at Chelsea's midfield, which is more than likely going to be Jorginho and N'Golo Kante and Mason Mount, because Mateo Kovacic is still injured at the moment. You think Real Madrid have more? They have more experience, perhaps more quality, more know-how at this level of football, and perhaps you favour them again. But you won't stop Chelsea going into it and thinking that they've got a chance. I think they're pretty confident with what they're doing, and they're making great progress under Thomas Tuchel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do remember they had a winning streak, to be honest, but I think it was West Brom against whom they eventually lost their entire consecutive victories. So it still is pretty tricky, but obviously with the consistency that they are right now, we surely can see and hope that this would be a very, very interesting match.
Yeah, the game against West Brom was disastrous. Out of context with everything else we've seen since Tuchel took over. And the thing about Chelsea is I always think back to the Champions League that they won in 2012, and they were all over the place in the league. They were in terrible form. They looked like a shambles at times that season, but they just kept winning against the odds, and they kept winning, and they came back from behind against Napoli, and they won a game they never really ought to have won against Barcelona in the semi-final, and then they went to play Bayern Munich in the final in Munich, and somehow managed to win it. It was the most incredible campaign, and I think that the one that proves that in the Champions League it's so impossible. It's impossible to predict who's gonna come out of it with the cup. So many things can happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyways, thank you so much, Matt, for being a part of the show and discussing the world of football.
Talk to you. Thank you.
Pleasure. So that was Matt, and he did discuss Premier League. Not only that, he also talked about the Champions League, and not to forget that it is going to be an interesting match, Real Madrid versus Chelsea. In obviously his perspective of time, it would be tonight, but for us, it's tomorrow. But anyways, you surely would want to have a look on that. But not only that, I'll just jump into the world of Formula One. Some interesting updates for that. Yes, F1 Sprint qualifying approved for 3 Grand Prix in 2021 season. And the additional short race that has actually been, which is supposed to be held, it would be on Saturday at 3 different events. And the race will take place on 2 European and 1 non-European venue. So there are major changes that have actually made in terms of the F1 itself. And the sprint qualifying will see the drivers who actually batted out over 100 kilometers on Saturday. So it is a few major tweaks that have been actually done in terms of how the Formula One is now changing their plan of action. And the top 3 finishers on Saturday, which will qualify and get those points. And 3 points for the first race, 2 points for the second one, and 1 point for the third one. And the finishing order will obviously follow up with the final grid, which would actually be at the main day on Sunday. So that would be it pretty much. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @of Indus News Sports. Till then, take good care of yourselves and bye-bye.